Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. I bet you thought that we had the landmines problem solved. We don't get very many things about disarmament or arms control. We don't make much progress, but we did have a real win a few years ago with the landmines treaty, or that's not quite the title for it. But at any rate, we've got a problem there again. So I want to talk about that first with two of my old friends, and both of them live in Victoria. Aaron Hunt is, I don't know what your title is. You're with the, come on,
I'm the executive director.
Executive Director of what? Say it again.
Mines Action Canada.
Mines Action Canada. All right.
Yeah.
And Yeshua Moser Plunkswan is not quite an executive director, but a bureaucrat. So would you?
I'm the thematic research coordinator for the Landmine Monitor, which is the annual publication of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines.
Mm-hmm. So you actually go out and you sort of know where they have them, right? That's your job, is to know who has landmines as well as what we ought to do to them. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and they're neighbors. They just live about a 15-minute bike ride from each other in Victoria. And they're dear friends of mine, but I don't see them enough, so we're going to get caught up. Okay, what's going on? I know what's going on a little bit, but you better start at the top and tell the whole world why we've got some new problems. Who wants to go first? Yeshua, you're not muted, and Aaron is, so you get to go first.
Well, we have a number of states in the Baltic who have made noise or actually taken some action to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel landmines. This is probably one of the most positively far-reaching foreign policy initiatives Canada has ever had. The vast majority of countries joined the Mine Ban Treaty, and the countries that we're talking about withdrawing are Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, and Finland. All of them took part in the meeting that brought about the Ottawa Convention back before 1997. None of them have used landmines, and most of them never produced either. Lithuania and Latvia both had very, very small stockpiles left over by the Soviets when they left their country. And Finland and Poland were both producers, and they both had relatively large stockpiles, which they destroyed upon joining the treaty. And up until December of last year, they were voting in favor of all nations joining this convention at the United Nations General Assembly. But in March of this year, four of those defense ministers, the defense ministers of Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland, issued on their own, not through their foreign ministries, a letter recommending their countries withdraw from the Anti-Personnel Landmine Ban Convention. And this is very unusual. It went out on the website of the Estonian Defense Ministry. So it totally bypassed their foreign affairs section. And they have lobbied within their own parliament to get a withdrawal passed. The Ottawa Convention does allow a nation to withdraw under certain conditions from the convention. They cannot be in armed conflict. Once they decide to withdraw and put in their withdrawal to the United Nations, they have to have a 6-month period before that withdrawal becomes effective. And the withdrawal won't become effective if they are involved in armed conflict during that 6-month period of time. This is based totally on fear of Russia. At least this is what's said publicly. I myself was in discussions with one of the ambassadors of Lithuania at the United Nations General Assembly last October when we were talking to them about their withdrawal from the Convention on Cluster Munitions. And we were saying, you know, this weapon cannot reasonably protect your country if the Russian state was so unwise as to take military action against you. The only thing that's going to protect you is your allies. Your country would fit into St. Petersburg twice with room to spare. This weapon cannot, there's no military utility in this decision. And as I listened to their response never negated that. Their response was totally emotional. Anyone over 40 in those countries remembers occupation by Russia, the Soviet Union. So their response was totally emotional. Ours was, you know, saying, well, what's the rational basis for this? That was probably a mistake. We live now in a post-rational world. But I was listening to it, and all of their responses were emotional. None of them ever challenged whether this weapon would be useful.
How far along is this withdrawal?
Erin, over to you.
Yeah, it has been passed by parliaments in Latvia and Lithuania, but they have not put forward the actual paperwork to withdraw. The Finnish parliamentary process is starting soon, and the Polish and Estonian parliamentary processes are underway at various stages. So they haven't quite got the paper in there yet to start that 6-month withdrawal waiting period that Yeshua mentioned. And I've had meetings with the Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian ambassadors to Canada, and got very similar responses to what Yeshua just said, where when asked about like why are they doing this, there's full recognition that anti-personnel landmines are not an effective deterrent against invasion, and they are not, have much military utility, but they have to be seen as doing something to protect their citizens. And for some reason, anti-personnel landmines are what they've chosen to demonstrate that they are doing something. But it's not clear how that actually makes them safer, besides undermining the global international humanitarian law and multilateralism structure that we all currently live under.
And they were in on it from the get-go. It wasn't like they had to be prodded originally.
Oh, they had to be prodded a bit. Poland and Finland definitely had to get some prodding. I think Yeshua was involved in that time period more.
What about now? Poland just had an election, and I'm oversimplifying by far, but I think they've elected a Trumpist type of regime. Is that going to make any difference?
It's too early to know. But the current president is supportive of this move.
Current one is, but you don't know. The guy when he was a candidate for the party didn't take a position, or did they?
I don't know if they did or not.
I'm not sure either.
But you, what sounds like it's fait accompli almost. I mean, it's just in the process, right? And it doesn't look. Can you think of anything that might turn that around?
Strong comments from their allies. So all of these countries are, NATO members, close allies with Canada. We cooperate with them quite a bit. We have military personnel stationed in Latvia. They've heard from a lot of their allies that, they shouldn't do this, but we do understand why you're doing this. And so they're not hearing as strong opposition as they expected from their allies. And that's somewhere where Canada and countries like the UK and France and Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, actually the rest of NATO, all of the rest of NATO except for the United States are strong supporters of this treaty. So they need to hear from their allies.
Well, they're strong supporters of the treaty, but they're also, they don't like Putin. And they're all, I mean, if not emotional, at least, their concerns are all right now what to do to block everything he wants to accomplish. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were more like, well, we fully understand, fellas. I see your point, that kind of thing. Uh, maybe I'm too fatalistic. Are you gearing up to do some kind of outreach campaign, or what are you going to do about this? Is there much you can do?
Oh, Yeshua, you just muted yourself if you wanted to talk. Okay. Yeah, so here in Canada, we are doing public engagement with the embassies that are involved, and other members of civil society are doing the same. We're also doing parliamentary outreach within the new parliament to get parliamentarians to talk to their peers in these countries. Globally, the International Campaign to Ban Landmines is mobilizing all of its campaigners around the world on this. We're working closely with the Finnish campaign to ban landmines. We're doing parliamentary engagement in all of these countries. Experts have testified in parliament in Estonia and either Latvia or Lithuania. I can't quite remember which one at the moment. We've had former military personnel visit some of these countries who are now deminers clearing landmines to explain how things actually work. We've had survivors do media interviews in these countries. There's currently a petition online through Move EU calling on Europe to not bring back landmines, which is open for signature right now. And it has about 80% of its goal already. And I think it's only been out, a week, Yeshua? Maybe that? Yeah. So we're really mobilizing the best we can on this. There's currently a giant banner on the broken chair in Geneva in front of the UN. So this broken chair is a chair that is missing one of its legs as a tribute to the anti-landmine movement and the leadership of landmine survivors around the world. It's probably 2 to 3 stories tall. And right now it has a banner on it calling out these 5 countries and asking them to not leave the treaty, because what we know is that landmines kill civilians. They don't have much military utility. So we're making some progress on making sure that leaving is going to be unpleasant for them.
Interesting about that chair. I've been there. I've seen that chair, but I didn't know it had anything to do with survivors of landmines. Who created that chair? That big statue?
Handicap International.
Say it again.
Handicap International.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
It's very effective piece of art, but okay. Now, the other thing that occurs to me is I'm not sure I trust my own memory on this, but I believe that I have read that in the eastern parts of Ukraine that are still held by Ukraine, that there are landmines that they've put up to try to stop incursions further advanced by Russian troops. Am I wrong, or is that true? And when would they have been put up if they are there?
Well,
There are landmines that have been used extensively by both Russia and to a lesser degree by the Ukraine in the armed conflict over the past few years. And Ukraine is a party to the Mine Ban Treaty, the Ottawa Convention. So this is a violation of their convention obligation. But I'd like to go back for a moment to the Baltic states. I mean, at some level, this whole thing is so surreal because it's the irrationality of it is astounding. Currently, if you are in Russia and you want to drive to Estonia or Latvia, you can do it. There's no problem. You can cross all those borders today in a car. Now, if they lay anti-personnel mines on their border, who are they going to hit? Well, there are a lot of people crossing the borders into those three states irregularly. Some people would call them illegal immigrants, but I would call them irregular crossers. Who are these people and where are they from? Well, most of them are Ukrainians who are trying to get out of that war zone. And if you lay mines on that border, you're going to have an extraordinary problem. Croatia is already suffering this. Croatia has minefields on its borders, which it's busy removing, part of its obligations under the convention. Those minefields are marked and fenced, and there are still refugees crossing the border into Europe on that border who are being injured or killed in those mines.
Now tell me where all of these are. I wish I had a map. The Croatian border with what? Can't visualize it anyway, but try.
I think it's Bosnia-Herzegovina, but don't hold me to that.
You think it's where?
I think it's with Bosnia.
Bosnia. Okay. Well, you can go from Bosnia to Croatia with no trouble, because I have a friend who does it. She goes, I mean, I don't know where, but okay, now you say it's also possible to drive from Russia across the border into Estonia?
Latvia and Lithuania, all three. You can do it today because I just checked.
You can do it, but now how much traffic is there? Do people do it very much? You're calling them illegal or irregular or something like that. Who are the people who are going across, and what kind of checks do they go through? What kind of border checks do they have?
If you're a Russian and you drive across the border, it's a regular border crossing. You show your passport. The people who are crossing irregularly cannot get visas or do not have passports. And the majority of those, according to the European Bureau that monitors these things, are Ukrainians who are fleeing Ukraine.
They're going. Ukrainians are in Ukraine, so they're coming from Latvia, Estonia into Russia. Or they're coming from Russia into Latvia and Estonia. Which way are they trying?
Most of them are crossing from Belarus.
Belarus into.
I'll get a map and put it up on this when I post this, so we can have a look. Because my imagination is pretty weak.
Okay. Here, if I'm allowed to share a screen, I've got a map of landmine contamination around the world I can show everyone.
Yeah, put it up. That'd be great.
Okay.
Because I think, I need help.
Okay. So hopefully you guys can see the screen there. So just for everyone's reference, the pinky red countries are countries with landmine contamination in 2023.
That's a lot. I had no idea. Those are they all have landmines.
Yeah, but the dark gray colors are countries that have completely cleared their landmines, thanks to the Ottawa Treaty. And the orange is mostly clear. There might be one or two things left. And the light pink is there may be some improvised landmines made by a non-state actor. So, I mean, there's quite a bit of dark gray, which is also quite nice. So what Yeshua was,
Almost the whole world is full of pink, bright pink. Ooh.
yeah, well, some of the bigger countries take up a lot of space, don't forget.
Oh, yeah, but look at that. I mean, it's still a majority of countries, isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
yeah, we're making progress. So, I mean, Sri Lanka is close to being cleared. Oman, I think, is 100% cleared now, but they haven't officially announced it. Yeshua can probably nod or shake his head at me there if I'm a little bit, I'm right on that one. And some of these, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is quite close as well until the recent fighting in Goma stepped back up and has slowed things down. A lot of the Balkans, which is this small circle pop out here where you can see Croatia, the borders that Yeshua was talking about were
Oh,
with
okay. I'm
Bosnia
sorry. Hold
and
on.
Serbia.
Now, these two circles at the bottom, that's the Baltics there, and what's on the right?
On the right is the Middle East, and on the left is the Balkans, not the Baltics.
B- oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Balkans.
Yeah.
Balkans. All right. Okay, but the
Yeah.
Baltics are, you don't have a special section for them. And
No, because
they had been pretty clear, mostly clear, right?
they're 100% clear right now. So, what their governments are looking to do potentially, I mean, the ambassadors have all told me they're not actually going to be using landmines, but they're opening themselves up to turning themselves pink, but dark red, and putting landmines on their own territory,
Mhm. Now, what's
which is,
over here? There are these huge, big spots over there. That's Kazakhstan, isn't it? But I don't know what these. Let's see. I can't visualize. I'm not very good with maps. What?
so the landmine free sections in the middle of Asia there include Mongolia, and you're right, that is Kazakhstan. And Yeshua, is there somebody else I'm forgetting in that region?
Hmm.
You're muted, sorry. Yes. Ah,
Yeah, and being on my phone, it's a little bit small. I'd have to look at the original map.
okay.
Hmm. Well, okay. So now give me. Let me see. Now, where's Croatia? I'm trying to see. Croatia is and the it's got. You say Croatia has them on the border. Is that it?
Yeah, so Croatia, Bosnia, and Serbia, as well as other area Kosovo, are all still contaminated from the
Mhm.
conflicts in the 90s.
Yeah.
Um, they're making great progress in clearance, but until they're 100% done, especially when there was waves of Syrian refugees coming through Southern Europe up towards Northern Europe, the landmines through the Balkans were a major threat.
Oh, of course. They don't want to get rid of them, do they?
Oh no, they do because they're also a major threat to their own people.
I see. Well, but at any rate, a lot of those countries have a very generous attitude toward migrants. We have a global town hall this last Sunday of every month, and there's a guy in Vukovar, Croatia, who's always updating us on how terrible it is for all these people trying to get through into Europe, and they just can't do it. They come through all kinds of places through there, and these countries are quite unwelcoming, let's say. Okay, so but you say that is not part of their calculation. They do want to get rid of them, huh?
They want to get rid of them,
Yeah.
and they're legally obligated under the treaty to get rid of them.
But it's not an easy thing, huh?
No, they have excellent demining programs in those countries.
Do they?
Yeah, lots of both civil society and government programs that are making great progress. What
Really?
was climate change and flooding has moved a number of the mines and areas that were already contaminated
Well,
and mapped and everything.
I'm sorry, say that again. The climate change has moved.
Well, with flooding, it can move because when you have floods and there's runoff and landslides and everything. If you've already mapped where the landmines are and then there's flooding, the landmines can move with the soil that is moved
Sure.
by water.
Uh-huh. And so that has happened in a number of places, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is a wonderful map. I mean, very disappointing map, but still, very enlightening, let's say, because I had no idea there were so many really contaminated, even places like India. What would India have landmines for?
Line of control between India and Pakistan.
Oh. And that, are they wanting them there? They still have them on purpose, or they just haven't gotten around to clearing them?
No, they are keeping them there, and they are replacing mines if they need to in those minefields.
Oh.
Along the line of control, there are villages that are, what's the word here? They are fenced in with the minefield. So there are villages that are along the line of control in Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir in India. And the mines are on the line of control. And then there is a security fence that was built some kilometers into India. And in between that fence and the mines, there are communities.
Oh.
And they have to stay in that area at nighttime because there are gates in those fences that are closed at night. There's no way for them to get out. They live with the mines near them, and frequently those mines move by snow melt or flooding into their fields. There are casualties there, both amongst Indian soldiers patrolling the line of control as well as the populace who is stuck with the minefields of their neighbors.
Okay, take the picture down so I can look at each of you. I like to see you.
There you go.
That's a very helpful map. So you're really unhappily, you're making me very unhappy because I didn't know that there were still so many countries with landmines. I've never seen a map like that before. So you've got a lot of work ahead of you before, even if we didn't have the setback now, that getting rid of them is still a huge job, isn't it?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to note about this, I mean, some people might say, well, it's a couple of Baltic states, they want to change their policies. What is the big deal? The big deal is that these conventions are based on international humanitarian law. And there is one state that has voted against the Ottawa Convention in the UN General Assembly over the last couple of years. Only one. That state is Russia. Now, they're essentially throwing themselves in with Russia. Putin would like nothing more than for more states to weaken international humanitarian law. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they're doing. For the very few states that are outside of the convention, 80% of the world's governments have joined the Ottawa Convention. They're busy removing their minefields. They've still got contamination. As we can see on that map, there's still a lot of it. But for the countries that have remained outside, this gives them more of an excuse. I can hear it coming. The next time I'm at the UN, they're going to say, oh, yeah, we haven't joined the convention yet. Hey, I hear you've got a couple of people who are leaving. They're going to jump right on it. It's weakening the floor by which we should never fall below. International humanitarian law should not be a high goal. It should be the goal that we should never fall below. And that's what their activities are going to do. It's going to weaken international humanitarian law. The floor that we should never fall below. We can't afford actions that weaken that floor.
Well, given the things that Trump is doing, it makes me wonder, have his people, or has he made any statement one way or another about landmines? I mean, he's doing every dirty thing he can think of that's contrary to human rights, but I haven't heard that he's taken a new position on landmines.
Sorry, since in this presidency. He did overturn an Obama era policy that prohibited U.S. use of landmines anywhere but the Korean Peninsula. So when he was president before, he did overturn that. Then the Biden administration went back to the Obama era legislation. And I have not heard whether they've officially overturned that yet. And I think it's just one of those things that we just don't want President Trump to notice. Because when he notices things,
Yeah, right.
that's where things go sideways. So if we can just keep it under the radar.
Well, unfortunately, this is going to go on Substack, and I don't know how many people will watch it, but somebody somebody might remind him. I don't know. We could go off on that tangent and spend the rest of the day talking about that. But you mentioned on the Korean Peninsula, I'd forgotten that those are still there, and they're going to leave them there, I gather, unless they can. There's no prospect of a deal between North and South Korea, is there?
Well, there's interesting things going on there. Some of them negative, some of them positive. The South Korean government has decided to remove every landmine they have that is south of the demilitarized zone. Anything that is in the actual demilitarized zone has to be done jointly. So they can't demine the DMZ because they have to have an agreement with North Korea to demine that. But everything outside of that, which is military bases in the south, as well as the civilian exclusion zone, which is actually bigger than the demilitarized zone. There is a civilian exclusion zone on both sides of the DMZ, and that is a relatively thick zone that has mines in it in both the north and south. So that is all going to be demined by the South Korean government. They have just put through the law that allows the declassification of that, and they're working on the necessary measures so that civilian demining organizations, currently the military is the only entity that can touch such things in Korea, so they have to change the...
Get closer to your mic. I'm not hearing you well.
Okay. The South Koreans have to change some of the rules around who can touch these things so that civilian demining organizations could be involved. Because currently only the military can touch such things. So they have to make an exception for that. That's common in most countries. They have to pass a regulation that will allow civilian demining organizations, humanitarian organizations to get involved. So this is going on in South Korea. But at exactly the same time, we are seeing North Korea lay more mines on its borders in the last year. There is no clear understanding why they're doing this. There's a lot of speculation. A lot of it has to do with halting people fleeing their country and halting soldiers from leaving their posts and running into either China or South Korea. But that's speculation. As far as I know, nobody's got a clear line to the leadership to know why they're doing this. But clearly they are doing this, both on their Chinese border as well as the South Korean border.
Mm-hmm. But you don't see any change in the geopolitical connections between North and South. I know there's some elections and things, but I've not been following that. Is there any heightened tension or a reduction of of tension or any change in the prospect of their future relationship?
There is, and unfortunately, I'm not remembering the precise details, so I better not do that.
Okay. Do you have the impression things are getting better or worse on that score?
Worse. Well, tension. It could be brinksmanship.
I see. Okay. Well, now Canada hasn't done anything one way or another. It hasn't changed or made any statements about landmines, right? I don't think it's a high-profile news item. We've got all this stuff going on about the Golden Dome, and now we've got all this stuff going on about the which I think is extraordinary. The drones knocking out so much of the Russian bomber fleet, so that those and the tensions with NATO and so on, and with all of these negotiations going on, I think probably landmines are the lowest priority concern that international diplomats are losing sleep over. Is that right or not?
Unfortunately, yes. We should, maybe one of the reasons why is because essentially outside of what's happening in the Baltics right now, landmines is actually a good news story. How many less victims there are as we do mine clearance, how much mine clearance there is going on in the world, how Canada was really the country that put this process in motion, how Canadian foreign policy through this has had a positive impact on the lives of people in so many countries around the world. You saw the map of landmine contamination. Well, there's clearance going on in virtually every one of those countries, spurred by the activity of the Ottawa Convention, and brought about by our activities to ban anti-personnel landmines around the world. So the basic story is still a good news story. That good news is going to be interrupted if the Baltics choose to go in the direction that their defense ministers want them to go, so that the defense ministers can look like they're doing something.
Tell me, it's a side trip, but are there innovations, technological innovations in landmine clearance devices, or I don't know, everything from animals to people? Are there any changes going on that will make it more efficient and safer to do landmine clearance?
There are some. So there's people who are working on doing sort of remote sensing to try and identify suspected hazardous areas more efficiently, using various types of technology, often on drones and that sort of thing, using LiDAR and radio waves and stuff like that. One thing we do see, though, is a lot of the time people that are trying to create this new technology to help clearance miss two really crucial steps in their process. The first step is learning about the International Mine Action Standards. So there are global standards that have been agreed to by states and operators of how you're supposed to do landmine clearance to make sure that when you say this piece of land is clear, people can trust it and people will be safe. So I often encounter people who are working on new technologies, and then I'm like, okay, like how have you been including we call it IMAS because International Mine Action Standards is a bit of a mouthful. Like, have you been looking at the IMAS? Like, how does this fit? And sometimes they don't know because they've never heard of the standards. And then the other thing that sometimes people who are creating new technology forget is to talk to the people doing the clearance now, and see what the needs are, where the problems are, and that sort of thing. So what makes really successful new technology for clearance is when it's grounded in the mine action standards. It's created with the people who are doing the clearance and the people living with the mines. Because, for example, if you do drone related activities, but it's in a community that has had a lot of attacks via drone, bombings and shelling, or bombings through drones, that's going to cause a lot of extra stress in your community. So you have to, do community work before you start doing that sort of thing and all that. So there's lots of
Right.
hope for technology.
Before you clear mines, you have to go into the community and make sure they like you and want you to be there, or what?
Yep, for sure. You have to make sure that communities know where you're going. Communities usually know where the mines are, where dangerous areas are. It's called non-technical survey. You need to talk to the community and be like, oh, well, 3 people have had an accident along that road. So please, we need to look at that. And you need to, because sometimes it's people's private land that needs to be cleared. So you have to have permission from the landowners to go there. You have to coordinate with local government and the communities to prioritize areas. You can't just rock up to somebody's field with a metal detector and the demining team, and if people don't know what you're doing, they're not going to be friendly.
Okay, what proportion of the work is still really dangerous? What proportion of it is done by, I've seen pictures of people lying on their bellies, creeping along, trying to do things by hand, and it looked to me like a very dangerous situation. How much of it is done in such circumstances, and how much now can be done remotely or technologically, or I don't know, by letting animals out there to sniff or something like that? I've heard that rats would do that or something, right?
The International Mine Action Standards are safety standards, not only for the community, but for the mine clearance teams themselves. And if you are really adhering to those standards and have done your prep work that you should have done under those standards, it's a pretty safe procedure. Probably safer than being a firefighter in Toronto. It's really very, very safe if you do it by that. Now, if you do it by other standards, commercial company standards, military standards, you're going to have casualties amongst your mine clearance people because they don't prioritize safety. They have other priorities. But if you use the International Mine Action Standards, those are based on humanitarian principles. They're based on the principle of safety, not only safety for the community, but safety for the mine clearance people as well. That takes time. It takes money. It's slow, but it's sure.
Mm-hmm. And are most of the landmine clearances going on that way now with people who are literally crawling around on their bellies? Is that still what
it depends?
See? Okay.
When you do your survey, you determine what types of clearance technology you can use. You may be able to use machines in the field because the soil is type that you could do that with, and the explosive hazard there won't destroy your machine. Your machine is capable of handling them. In other cases, you may have to be out there on your belly, crawling along and doing it that way. There may be a possibility of remote sensing by drone. It all depends on the terrain, the types of explosive hazards you're going to encounter there, what you need to do to protect the local community, how close they are to the site that you're clearing. There's so many factors to take into account. So all of that has to be done in advance before you actually start taking mines out of the ground.
Mm-hmm. I needed this little lesson because this is all really quite new to me. Or it shouldn't be, but at least I haven't been thinking about it for years. Okay, now where do you go from here? What's your agenda? Just tell me how you spend your day. I think Aaron, you do administrative work, but tell me how Mines Action Canada is functioning, what you're doing, and what your plans are for the future.
Sure. Yeah, I do probably a little bit more administrative work than I did was like when I was like a project manager, but the majority of my day is working with the global campaigns, writing advocacy materials, working with my colleague Jillian, who runs our youth program. One of the things Mines Action Canada does a lot of is we create space for the youth that are on the ground in landmine affected communities and other communities to be able to interact and share their expertise with the multilateral diplomats level of decision making. So far today, I've had a couple meetings with colleagues from other organizations to talk things through on a few topics. I met with a senator about a parliamentary event we're doing next week, just to make sure that everything is set up, and a few other event things. We're working on new ways for people to fundraise for MAC. So Jillian and I have been working on a few social media kit for how you can promote MAC yourself, and reaching out to some of our alumni from our youth program. And then I prepared a little bit to talk to you. And I also emailed some Finnish parliamentarians about their new legislative process about leaving the treaty.
All of the Baltic countries are pretty similar in their attitude about this now. When Estonia flipped, all the others flipped too. Is that right?
My understanding is that Estonia originally didn't want to do this, and they had done an assessment that they didn't need landmines in the fall of last year. But they do have a bit of an agreement to move as a unit, those three countries together. So I'm not sure what the internal, maybe Yeshua has intel that I don't.
Finland would be a different kettle of fish, right? And Finland has a lot of a big border with Russia, a long border, right?
They do indeed, but neighboring state Norway also has a border with Russia, and they've said there's no way they're going to leave the convention banning anti-personnel mines. They're not going to leave the Ottawa Convention.
Okay. Well, but the difference is they weren't part of Russia, or they weren't part of the Soviet Union, and it makes a difference. I really think so. Now, Yeshua, tell me about your own work, because you spend half of the year in Thailand, and I'm not sure how much work there is on landmines to be done in Bangkok and wherever else you go. What do you do in Bangkok?
I do the same thing I do here since I work remotely. Part of it is finding the information that's necessary for the annual report of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, which we call the Landmine Monitor. We've been publishing it for 25 years, and each year we look at every country around the planet through the lens of the Ottawa Convention and determine, maybe they've met all their obligations, they're not a problem state, maybe they're a state that hasn't joined yet, have they made any moves towards it? Is it a state where there's contamination that is being removed or not? Or is it a real problem state where they are actually using anti-personnel landmines? So when I'm in Thailand, a lot of my focus is on Myanmar, where there's very active use of landmines by every party to the conflict. There's an increased amount of contamination every year over the past 10 years in Myanmar. So there's more.
Are you saying they're increasing, they're laying landmines in Myanmar?
Yes, they are laying landmines as of 15 minutes ago.
Wow. Oh boy. I didn't know that. Okay. The government of Thailand is laying them where? Where would
No, this is Myanmar. Myanmar.
the government of Myanmar would be laying them where?
They're throughout the country because there's uprisings against them in virtually every part of the country, and
Oh,
those groups also are laying landmines in their warfare with the central
mm,
regime.
okay. Well,
There are in Thailand a few mines remaining on the border with Cambodia. And in Cambodia, which used to be one of the most landmine affected countries on the planet, they almost finished their mine clearance. Both Thailand and Cambodia are still doing border demarcation.
mhm,
And that is the only area where there are still landmines. It's on the undemarcated area of their shared border.
mhm.
So that process of demarcating that border is going on right now, and those landmines will be cleared up as that process
I
finishes.
have the memory, anyway, of talking, I think it's Earl Turcott, who spent a lot of his career working with people in Laos about, and it wasn't landmines, it was on unexploded ordnance from the Vietnam War, where the American planes dropped things in Laos that they weren't even trying to kill the Laotians. They were, I don't know, I don't know why they dropped them there, but apparently Laos has a whole lot of, or had a lot of unexploded ordnance that had fallen from planes and that were killing still killing people. Now that was when Earl was telling me about it, and I wonder if the people doing landmine clearance are also mindful of and involved with trying to clear up this other stuff, debris of the Vietnam War, and would they be doing it, as part of the same project? Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. And the answer is yes. Of course, it's yes. The mine clearance teams, when they are going through an area, they find a landmine, they remove it. And if they find something else, they don't leave it. They say, "Oh, you're not a landmine. We're not going to clear you." No, of course they don't. Um, anything
But
that has been
no,
explosive
yeah,
hazard
except
to
that
human beings.
I would assume though that when they're looking for landmines, it would be rare to just come across one of the Vietnam vintage, but that the Vietnam vintage would have a different map, that you'd be looking for them someplace else, so you'd maybe need a different project to do it. I was only imagining, but you say that one project can handle both. Is that?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's correct. Now, one of the things that is different is Laos is primarily a contamination problem from cluster submunitions left over from the Indochina War. They have less of a landmine problem, not very much at all, compared to Cambodia, say, or even in Thailand prior to current time. It's mostly unexploded ordnance from cluster munitions that was Laos's problem. But those crews did come across landmines and a few other things when they were doing their cluster munition clearance, and they would remove those things too. Just as any other team in a country where it's primarily anti-personnel landmines, if they find something else like an unexploded mortar or grenade, they remove that too.
Mhm.
These teams clear whatever the explosive hazard is. They will use different methodology according to the type of danger that piece of explosive hazard provides, because you have to approach them differently. When I first went to Laos and I went out to look at a clearance project, I didn't see any red tape to tell me where the safe lanes are. If you go to a mine clearance area, there's always what they call safe lanes, and they're marked by red tape. I didn't see any whatsoever. And they looked at me and they laughed because they said, you're using minefield. We have cluster munitions here. We clear them very differently. So the methodology is different based on the explosive hazard. But anything they find, they use the proper procedure to remove that explosive danger.
Well, is the explosive actually handled differently? In other words, maybe you can step on one of those mines or one of those ordnance things, and nothing happens. Do you have a different safety protocol for dealing with those different
Yes.
weapons? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, different methodology, different safety protocol. Absolutely.
Okay.
But
Sorry.
sorry,
They made a lot of progress in cleaning up Laos.
yeah, they have. But just a reminder that anything that is an explosive that you find in the ground that's not a landmine, if it's still around after it's been fired or dropped from a plane, something went wrong with it, right? So that means that it's not necessarily predictable. So when it comes to clearing cluster munitions, they're failed munitions. So you have to be careful in a different way because they're less predictable. Whereas a lot of the mines, that if they're going to operate, they operate this way. But yeah, Laos is making great progress. Laos is a leader on the Convention on Cluster Munitions, which is a similar treaty to the Ottawa Treaty that's about cluster munitions, and it was totally inspired by the Ottawa Treaty. They'll actually be hosting a review conference next year, hopefully in Laos, so the international community will be able to see exactly how much progress they've made since the last time they hosted a meeting, which was back in, I think, 2010 or 2011. It was right before I started at Max, so they'll be able to show the progress that they've made there.
Wow. Well, I should have had this conversation years ago because I learned so much today that I didn't even know I needed to learn. And thank you very much. And I'd expected that we would want to veer off course and talk about some of Yeshua's adventures in Thailand, but there's no room for that. We had such a good, enlightening conversation about landmines. So thank you very, very much. I hope a lot of people watch this because if other people are the way I am, we all need to learn more. Thank you both, and carry on. You're doing the work of the Lord.
Thanks so much for having us.
Okay, bye, dears.